you know, on my head I had too much sun, and they had to remove some spots, you know, so I can't be in the sun.
We have 10 minutes.
Okay.
10 minutes.
Beautiful.
So let's start.
So we go fast.
Yeah. So my
Let's go.
my first question would be, what is art for you today?
What is art for me today?
Yeah.
Art is the understanding that every new generation needs to have a new image. We need to have a translation of the old ideas, and they have to be updated and brought into the future. And this has been going on since the prehistoric times. It's part of human existence. It's something that that if we don't do it, then, and we've seen this before, then cultures can perish actually from the earth because they didn't keep moving forward when they had the chance.
And so, what do you think art mean in this society of today? Society leading by economy, marketing, projection.
Yeah, well, that's a big problem because the people, in terms of if you look at the large swath of human history in the ages, you realize that we are in a very, very narrowly defined area, and that's being, as you say, driven by economics, driven by the need to make money, to create capital, and to continue to circulate internally the power structures that keep all of that going. So right now it's a very tight kind of situation, and the ability for people to expand their minds and really understand something not just in a scientific way, but in an emotional way, in a spiritual way, is at risk right now. You know, we have to find a way to break through this system that continues to try to define who we are based on money and on power.
So, what do you think can bring that we don't have now?
What
do you think it can
bring that we
to
don't
us
have now?
that we don't have now? Like there's a lack of.
Well, I think what's missing from today's world is equality, and what's missing from today's world is the compassion, which means basically kindness. What's missing today is the idea of helping one another instead of only yourself. So all of these attributes, all of these aspects circulate around the question of money and around totalitarianism and around this kind of limiting of people's rights and things like that. So like what's been happening with the Arab Spring right now and everything, I think is a real extraordinary moment. Personally for me, I'm working on a big project for St. Paul's Cathedral in London, and one of the panels for it is based on the life of Mary, and I'm actually going to present that not as the biblical Mary only, but I'm going to present that as the idea of Mary as the Earth Mother, who is exactly the persona that we absolutely are missing right now, because the male power in the past 2,000 years really and more has been dominated by men, and women have been subjugated. And if you really think about it, that's the completely wrong, completely backward way to do it. I mean, traditionally, the mother, the great mother, what the Hindus call the Mahadevi, is the center of the world. I mean, women bring life into the world, literally from their bodies, and they also bring the idea of fertility They bring the idea of birth, the ability to create life. These are sacred things that are existed in all of mankind since prehistoric times. And in the last 2,000 years or so, and especially more recently, in the last 1,000 years, it's actually really completely distorted itself so that the women are subjugated and they're pushed down and they don't have the rights that men have. And that has to change, because if it doesn't change, it will be so imbalanced. And what we really need is, we need the frame of the house. When you put the two sides together, they should be absolutely equal. Now they're way wrong. They're wrong. And that, I think, is what this next millennia is going to do. I think the next millennia will very strongly be about women, and about how women can really bring a whole different way of thinking into the world. So I'm very optimistic, actually.
And so you think that art can change that?
Sure.
That vision of the world?
Yeah, because art, we're artists. I mean, we have the tools, we have the experience to make images. We bring images into the world. It's a kind of birth like what women do, but a little different. It's different, but it is another kind of birth. And we bring, artists, male and female, we bring new images into the world, which you have to have new images every so often so that the culture doesn't stop. It has to keep going. And I think that's what's needed today. And it's going to be difficult because the male, hierarchy is going to really fight against that. They're going to really want to keep things the way they are. And if we keep things the way they are right now, in the next millennia, I don't even know if there's going to be a next millennia.
Okay. So in another subject, do you think that new technology lets us experience like it used to be in the 70s, when they did mistakes, and mistakes lead to something new? Because now with the technology, there's no mistakes anymore, and so we can't discover something else that we didn't predict, but that looked nice and
well, I mean,
have a meaning.
That's I don't know, because I think if you look at Prometheus, Prometheus he's he was the messenger that was able to travel from the earth up to heaven. Okay, so he could be on earth with all of us here, and be living with us and talking with us, and then he could also ascend to heaven, basically Mount Olympus, the home of the gods, and he could talk to the gods in Olympus, and he could travel between both, sending messages. So that's how the gods communicated with people on earth, and that's how people on earth communicated with the gods. So that's a very, very important function. Now the interesting thing is, when Prometheus thought he'd be a little tricky, because basically he's a trickster in the Greek mythology. He's the tricky guy. So he's always dealing on either side and getting the best deal for himself. So when he stole fire from the gods on Mount Olympus and flew down to earth to bring them this fire thing, which was only in the control of the gods, they were so angry. So he comes down to earth and he sets up his fire, and people are like, oh, they look at it, and first of all, it's warm, so they could warm their house on the cold nights, and then they realized they could cook their food, on the fire, and it tastes, so much better. So they had all of these amazing new things now, and they felt really excited. And then one day, one of them decided that they were going to, he put his hand too close to the fire and he burned his finger. He says, oh no, and it's really horrible. And then all of a sudden, at that point, they realized, I could burn my house down. And then they realized, I could burn the forest down, and I wouldn't have it anymore. So Prometheus is the one that is the origin of the term technology, because a techne in ancient Greece was the name of the word techne, meant a trick. So Prometheus brought him a trick, and then therefore a trick is good or bad. It has two sides, not one. So yes, he could have fire and keep his family warm and stuff. But also, he could burn his house down. And that's what technology is. Technology is not good or bad, it's both. You know, and we will never get to the point of having a perfect anything. We've sent up rockets into space that explode and kill people. You know, it is guaranteed. You know, huge, massive things. You know, really large disasters, and really tiny little small things. You know, you spill your coffee on the floor or something. Anytime that happens, just think about Prometheus. You know, because that's what he does. He just makes chaos. You know, there's a chaotic side, and you're never going to have perfection. Perfection is something that doesn't exist.
Okay. And about technology, how can we tell a story now through the 3D for you? Is it possible to tell still a story in 3D?
Yeah, you can tell a story in 3D. You can tell it in 2D. You can tell it in 1D, which is a drawing. So, you know, we've always told stories. And the original ways we told stories was to get everybody around the fire, and then the senior person, the leader of the clan, would tell these special stories, which were the creating of the history stories of the tribe, you know, and that was something really important. That's kind of, when you go to the movies today and you look at these movies that we have, it's kind of the same thing, believe it or not. I mean, it's very similar to what it was in prehistoric times, when everybody was around the fire and they were talking about the gods and what the gods did, and all of these action, they were kind of like action movies, you know, for the Paleolithic period. And, you know, we still do them today in the form of these motion pictures. And then we like to change things, because what human beings do is they move forward. Every culture does that. So in a way, you know, we're still moving forward. So we didn't have 3D 10 years ago, and now we have 3D. And 10 years from now, we'll have something else, you know, because human beings keep moving, just like our Paleolithic ancestors, you know. One day they're throwing spears at bison, you know, and then one of them just figures out the atlatl. You know what that is? An atlatl is an extra piece of wood that they put, if you have a spear here that you're going to throw at something, the atlatl is something that extends your arm out like this, so you throw it way back there, and now when you throw it, it's got twice the force and it goes twice as far. Now some prehistoric person that we don't know about invented that. You know, they didn't put a patent on it in those days, but they invented that. So there's always progress being made with human beings.
So there was Wim Wenders, who did recently a movie about Pina Bush in 3D, said that there was a new invention about 3D, that it was a new relation between the body and the space. And so that led us into something different, that that 2D was just fiction, and now 3D is interacting with all the people that are looking. We're not just looking at but we actors, kind of.
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I think 3D is interesting. I haven't done it myself yet, but I have a friend who works with me at my studio from time to time, and he's very engaged in 3D. And yeah, it's a very interesting form, and it's very engaging, like you say. What it is it puts you kind of inside the image, and it's not always working well, you know. It's still rather difficult to do it really good, but I think certainly that'll be a very important tool in cinema, you know, for the foreseeable future. I don't know though how essential it is, you know. I mean, we really forget about things like, you know, books, you know, or even iPads, which are kind of like books. We're very quick to go to the next new thing, you know, and that's okay. There's people we should be exploring all the time. But on the other hand, we also have to remember to look at these different devices, these different techniques. We have to look at them you know, clearly, and watch them carefully and make sure that we are using them in the right way, in their best capacity, so that we're using them in the best way to do whatever we want to do, because we are the ones who are in control, not these machines. So we are the ones that are saying, okay, well, yes, I'll use 3D on this movie because of this, that, and that, and that's important. And then if another project doesn't need the 3D, you shouldn't try to do the 3D. You know, just use each thing for what it does best. You know?
Best experimentation in art.
My best experimentation in art. That's a very interesting question, because there's a lot of things out there. My very best experimentation. I think probably for me the best piece I ever made was a work called Ocean Without a Shore. And Ocean Without a Shore is based on That's really beautiful. Thank you, thank you. Ocean Without a Shore is a piece I did in a deconsecrated church in Venice, Italy. And I put in 3 plasma screens in this small chapel. And I had created a I set up a video system with 3 screens in my studio, and I found about 23 people that I selected who would walk towards us, towards the camera, and then just before they arrived at the last part of this long corridor, they were met with a water wall pouring down, and you couldn't really see it until they actually arrived at it. And then as they walked through this water wall, you know, originally they were visible only in black and white, in a very kind of old, primitive kind of camera that I had. And then once they walked through the water, they became fully alive. Their flesh was very vivid, and the clothes they were wearing were very vivid, and they just kind of walked through this water. And they stay on our side looking at us, and then at a certain moment they realize they have to go back, so they turn away from us and walk back, and they go back to the dark side with this black and white image. And this was happening at all moments, you know, every few minutes in this beautiful old chapel. And that was probably the best piece I ever did, because it was the most connected to the life story. You know, that you start as a speck and you become a being, and you get closer, and then you come into existence through the mother's birthing experience, and then you grow and you develop, and then one day it's your time to leave. That's the story of human beings. So you accept this, and you turn around, and they walk back through the water, and they walk back into the darkness. And that's happening in this piece constantly all day long on these 3 screens. The first time we set it up was in a chapel in Venice, Italy, and it was very emotional, because it's a chapel from the 15th century, and it just fit beautifully with these plasma screens. So, and it's going to a museum in Philadelphia permanently, that piece. It's called Ocean Without a Shore, you know, which comes from a Islamic Sufi master who said, the self is an ocean without a shore. It has no beginning or no end in this world and the next. So it's just the continual movement of humanity over and over and over again, from birth to death, constantly moving. You know.
And so the last question was, did you ever felt or live in the nirvana in your life?
Did I ever feel what?
Felt or lived the nirvana? Like
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I was 6 years old, and I was on holiday with my parents and my brother in upstate New York, north of New York City in the mountains. And we were swimming in the lake, and I went out to this, they have a raft platform. So I went out there with my cousin, and my uncle was there. And so he put me up on the raft, and we were playing, and then we had these inner tubes, you know, these rubber tubes. Yeah. So I was standing on the edge of the platform, and my uncle said, well, just why don't you jump in, to my cousin and myself. So my cousin jumped, and he held on to his thing. I didn't, and I went boom, right down to the bottom like a stone. And I saw probably the most beautiful place I've ever seen in my life. It was a kind of paradise, and it had beautiful green and blue shafts of light, and it had, you could see plants moving like this. There were fish swimming very slowly. The color was really beautiful. So I thought I was in heaven. I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and I would still be there if my uncle didn't come in at the last minute and pulled me back out. I would be dead. And so from that experience, for the rest of my life, I've always imagined, and my work is about this, I always felt like I wanted to go back to that place. That was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen.
Is it why you're using all the time water?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons, definitely. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.